Welcome. My name is Antje and I'm an associate editor of the Journal of Small Business Management. I have the great pleasure to talk with Professor Zoltan Acs about their research on the quality of the digital platform economy around the world. The research had been conducted by him together with his colleagues, Professors Esteban Lafuente and Laszlo Szerb. Zoltan is Professor Emeritus at the Shah School of Policy and Government at the George Mason University. Their paper, Analysis of the Digital Platform Economy Around the World, a network DAA model for identifying policy priorities, has been published July 2022 in the Journal of Small Business Management. Zoltan, to start with, can you please tell us where the idea for the paper came from?
Well, this paper is actually part of a long line of research that has been going on, I would say, for at least 20 years. And I think the first project in this sort of vein, almost like a vein of silver in a mine, was the GEM project, the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor project out of the London Business School. And that started this idea of, can we collect data and compare countries around the world? And the reason that was interesting is because different countries were interested in how they were doing and how they could improve their entrepreneurial positions, I suspect is a way to put it. And the GEM project first had data on just sort of Western European countries in the US, and they all looked sort of similar. And that then started to collect data on less developed countries, and all of a sudden we started to see more variation. So that's how this research sort of started. There were other projects by the World Bank, the Ease of Doing Business. There was the World Economic Forum that wasn't really about this, but it was also about countries. And this line of research evolved over the years. And the problem was nobody knew how, so we had numbers. So we knew which countries, whatever number we ended up coming up with. Right, in GEM it was the TEA. In the Ease of Doing Business, it was an index number. These numbers weren't very satisfactory. And the reason was that we were measuring quantity instead of quality. And it turned out the countries with the most people starting a business were actually the countries that were not doing very well, because everybody was a self-employed farmer or small business person. And this, so that's the background. Szerb and I, and Erco Audio, and Imperial College, and a few other people then developed something called the Global Entrepreneurship Index, where we realized that coming up with one number wasn't really very helpful. And we realized, and other people started thinking, that what's really important, right, is not only what agents do for entrepreneurs, but also what's that environment that they sit in, right? Or so what's the ecosystem, to use the modern vernacular. And so then around 2010, we developed something called the Global Entrepreneurship Index. And then we collected a lot of data to be able to measure this from one country to the other. And that was actually very helpful and very useful. That was published in Research Policy in 2014, sort of the first paper to try to measure the ecosystem as it relates to entrepreneurship. The problem that we ran into with that is that it was built on sort of a pre-digital mindset. We hadn't really thought through that the technology had changed. It had changed drastically. And so then in 2015, we started working on how do we come up with a methodology that incorporates both entrepreneurship and digital technologies. And so in 2017, we published a paper in Small Business Economics called The Digital Entrepreneurial Ecosystem. That sort of tried to, here was the problem, right? People in the entrepreneurship literature didn't look at technology because they didn't understand it. And the people in computer information systems, computer management, information science, they didn't think about entrepreneurship because they didn't understand that. And so there was this big void. Now, I think people at MIT had started to pull some of this together, and they were looking at it from the point of view of platform organizations. And so this literature started developing. But anyway, after we published that article, it sort of gave you a way to think about this the global digital platform economy. And that methodology then led to the creation of a completely new database, which I lose track of what do we call these things, a digital entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think that's what it's called, database, right, where we have data on 120 countries for about 64 variables, right? And what we put together, right, was a database on 4 broad categories out of this methodology, right? The first one was digital infrastructure. The second one was the platform organizations. And then the third one was digital users, right? And then the fourth one was what we now call platform dependent firms, which are really entrepreneurs creating businesses to build apps and platforms. So that's the background. This data set was put together over the last couple of years, and we published it in 2021. So it's right here, the Digital Platform Economy Index, published by Springer. And this has all the data, how it's put together, so on and so forth. So that's all background. So this paper, which was, I guess, just came out, then raises this question. We have this data, but it's all, you know, it's not really analyzed in a way to help us think about what's happening in these different countries. So in this paper, we developed this network model, and we've used this before in other papers with the old data set, but never in such a systematic way. So this paper was an attempt to come up with this method that would let us look at the data in a way that it would really help us influence policy and to help countries determine where they should put their efforts if they want to improve, like what we call now the digital platform economy. So that's sort of a long answer to your short question.
Fantastic. Very fascinating to hear that background for that paper and how long the idea evolved and how many input was given there. You mentioned that the key audience was in fact policymakers. So what would be your key takeaways for them?
Well, so look, there's two takeaways. One is now older, which I already alluded to, that if you want to improve entrepreneurship, it's not enough to focus on people, right? You have to focus on the ecosystem. And we've known this since, we've been talking about this since about 2010. Eisenhardt at Babson started talking about it and Feld, and then the academic literature caught on. So now it's sort of accepted that if the ecosystem is not conducive to entrepreneurship, you're not going to really get any benefit out of people trying to start businesses. Just won't work. So that's one. And then the second issue, and this is now starting to percolate throughout the literature, that there is no one-size-fits-all policy. And this took a long time because, you know, back in the GEM days, we just said, more startups and everything will be great. And then you end up with 1 million startups and nothing happened. And so we now know that each situation is different, right? Each country is at a different stage of development, even if they have the same GDP per capita. And so policy now needs to be tailor-made to each country and each situation specifically. And the problem with that was that there was no way to sort of, from existing data and even comparing data across countries, right, to try to give policymakers tools that would help them do that. So, you know, there's this project in Europe called Smart Specialization. Phil McCann and others, and it's been around for years. They have tons of money. And right, what they want to do is they want each region to be entrepreneurial, even poor ones. And so the question was, what kind of policies should be used or developed for each region? And they really couldn't come up with, you know, they said you have to discover it. Well, yeah, we know that, but, you know, nobody knew where they should be looking. So what this paper does, right, it basically takes this simple model of the digital and the entrepreneurial ecosystem, right, breaks it up into much finer pieces. And so we can actually clearly focus on, right, the infrastructure, right, the two pieces that sort of preclude everything, right, is the infrastructure and policy and the platforms, right? These are the two big pieces. The platforms are the big platform companies, the Googles, the Apples, the Microsofts, right? And then the institutions and the governance, right, are the technologies, the phone companies, the chip makers, right? All of this infrastructure, right? And one is sort of more in the government's hands, the other one is more the market. But so this is one big piece of it that's necessary, right? But this doesn't make any money. And this doesn't build the platforms, right? So the concept we developed in the 2017 paper, right, we called the the digital entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? And that was made up of the users and of the entrepreneurs that created these companies, right? And why these are so important, right, is because all of the costs in this platform economy are in, like, paying entrepreneurs to develop the technologies and build the platforms and write the apps, right? But that's a cost. There's still no money in this, right? And the money is in the users, right? You need to get the users to pay for either being matched up or for using an app, right? So on Uber, you pay to get matched up with a driver, on Airbnb or a Google search, right? All of those things. And the other one is when you buy a smartphone, right, they give you 20 apps or 100 apps, but you're paying for those, right? And so the money is going to pay for those entrepreneurs. And so the users are the source of revenue, the platform dependent firms is the entrepreneurial piece. And then these both are dependent on a well-functioning infrastructure and platform organizations. And so what this paper does is it takes each country and breaks out their strengths and weaknesses in these 4 areas. And then each one of these areas has three variables that measure it. So that there are sort of 12 pillars. And so you can actually dig into the data and see where a country is weak, where it's strong, where it's average, and then try to develop policies to improve those parts that are really suboptimal.
Fascinating. As a final question, in terms of theoretical insights, what would you say are the key takeaways for the academic community?
So look, I think it's been a long time coming to try to theoretically understand where we are. And so look, let me throw out a couple of terms that we hear a lot. Digital transformation. How long has this term been around?
Forever.
Not that long, right? But we're now, the digital economy. That term's been around a little longer, but that's not that old either, right? And what is the digital economy? We don't really have a good understanding of that either. Where we know a lot, because people have been studying this now for at least 10 years, is platforms. Right? The strategy people have been studying platform organizations. And so we have a pretty good idea of that. We also have a reasonable good idea of the chip making business that drives the digital economy. And we have a good understanding of the service providing companies that provide us with the internet access and all that. We didn't have a real good understanding of the role of entrepreneurs in all this because, entrepreneurship is all over the place. And we didn't really understand users that much except in the marketing literature. And so the problem was there were half a dozen, maybe a dozen literatures all over the place. And to try to understand the digital economy was just very difficult. And so I think now we're actually making progress. Where we have better understanding of what the platforms are, of platform strategy, right, of platform dependent firms. We understand these two-sided markets better. And so I think we're starting to see, I shouldn't say see, I hope we're going to be able to have these different disciplines start talking to each other so that we can learn, right, how this new phenomena that is now become ubiquitous around the world is actually working. And we're not there, but I think we're getting there. And so this paper tries to bring the data together, right? It brings together some theoretical insights, and then it brings a way to statistically think about how to develop policies. So I think the theory, the data, and the policies are slowly coming together. And we're heading toward a better understanding of, I guess the broad term is the digital platform economy, if we want to think in a world that way today.
Really fascinating, Zoltan. Do you have any further thoughts or comments about the research that you would like to share before we finish our session?
I think one of the ways is you have to create these research networks that cut across disciplines and schools and continents. And I think we're just starting to move in that direction. You know, if you're just going to stay within the entrepreneurship field or small business or strategy, we're not going to really increase our understanding. So I think these research networks that pull people in from different disciplines are going to help us move in that direction. And I think we're starting to see some of that happening.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Zoltan, for taking the time today to share your thoughts and insights about that, not just that one paper, but the whole research and how it came about. So the full version of the paper is available at the Taylor and Francis website of the Journal of Small Business Management. I'm sure the viewers will want to learn more about that paper, and I very much enjoyed also learning about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.